Dr. Mike Brennan, Director of the National Hurricane Center. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. This has been kind of a crazy weekend. Things really changed pretty quickly here. So I want to talk about the evolution of this storm and where we're at now and what we're looking at going into the future. So can you take me through what has happened here over the weekend? Because we were looking at a tropical storm not too long ago, and all of a sudden now we have a major hurricane.
Yeah, I mean, Beryl was just a tropical depression Friday afternoon. And, within a couple of days, we're a Category 4 hurricane, just rapid intensification almost from the outset, from Genesis onward. Almost unprecedented, or in fact, unprecedented in that part of the Atlantic Basin in June. It's the strongest hurricane that we've ever had in the Atlantic Basin in June, and very unusual to have that kind of rapid development in the main development region approaching the Caribbean islands this time of year.
So going into this season with our change here in kind of ocean currents, we thought might be a strong season. Is that the reason for this, or what are kind of the factors at play here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's consistent with the expectations for a very busy season, and looking at those very warm to record warm ocean temperatures that have essentially opened up the main development region in the tropical Atlantic for formation, a month or two ahead of schedule. Typically we would see a storm like this maybe in August or September, closer to the traditional peak of hurricane season, but now we're seeing it in late June and then early July. So that is a signal that, it's not just the ocean. The atmospheric conditions obviously have to be really favorable to get a formation like this and this kind of rapid development. But it is a sign that we are starting to see, at least for now, those very favorable conditions unfold across the Atlantic Basin.
Okay, so we went to major hurricane strength today and then kind of bumped up to this Cat 4 strength. Can you talk about how you found that out and the Air Force and NOAA reconnaissance that went into it?
Yeah, on the Sunday morning, we had both the NOAA and the Air Force Reserve hurricane hunters flying into the storm. And again, just shows the value of that data because, based on satellite estimates up until we got the aircraft in there, at 5 a.m. on Sunday morning, we estimated the intensity at about 85 knots or about 100 miles per hour. And when the aircraft got in there just a couple hours later, we found out it was 100 knots or 115 miles an hour. So, 15, 20 miles an hour stronger than the satellite presentation suggested. So that's just, again, how vital it is to have the aircraft in there. And then as they were in there Sunday morning into early Sunday afternoon, we were able to see that intensification continuing, the pressure continuing to fall, the flight level and surface winds continuing to come up. So it's vitally important to have the aircraft in the storms when they are rapidly changing, because again, you can see the changes, but Sunday morning we saw the eye clear out, saw this sort of very classic major hurricane presentation on satellite imagery. So we knew it was stronger, but the aircraft really gives us an idea of direct measurements of just how much stronger.
Yeah, and it's not just the drop zones anymore, right? There's drones going in now. And do you know exactly what took those measurements?
Yeah, well, what we were basing it on this Sunday morning was the flight level winds that both aircraft collect, as well as the step frequency microwave radiometer that gets an estimate of the surface winds, as well as the dropson data that measures, most reliably, the pressure inside the eye when they do a drop when they go through the center.
Okay, so let's talk about what's next here. Over the next several days, we're talking about certainly landfalling impacts. We've been talking about the winds, but there are other impacts. Does Beryl have any particular other major hazards that we should be looking at other than winds?
Yeah, I mean, storm surge is going to be a big problem in portions of the Windward Islands, near and just to the right or the north of where the core of that eye wall goes through those islands. We could see storm surge of 6 to 9 feet above normal tide levels. But not just the surge, but the potential for destructive wave action on top of that. So those islands, especially small islands like in the Grenadines, you could see significant overwash, significant inundation, damage to structures. So we're very concerned about the area from St. Vincent through the Grenadines south to Grenada, that for the potential for both the life-threatening storm surge and also the potentially catastrophic impacts of a Category 4 hurricane eye wall moving through that region. And in addition, even outside of maybe those core impacts, Beryl's got hurricane force winds extending 25, 30 miles out from the center. But those islands have topography too, islands like Barbados and St. Lucia. So in those higher elevation areas, you could see winds 20 to 30% higher than they are down at sea level. So especially in gusts, and remember, Beryl's moving at 20 to 25 miles per hour. So the background flow is already quite strong. So as you get those bands of showers and thunderstorms, you begin into sort of that inner core, those winds are going to mix down to the surface pretty effectively and could be even stronger at higher elevation. Also looking at the potential for widespread rainfall totals of 3 to 6 inches, but some isolated totals, again, topographically enhanced 8 to 10 inches in some places. So that could just contribute to the challenges going on there with freshwater flooding.
Could that topography be helpful as Beryl moves away from the Windward Islands for wherever it's headed next? Is it going to have an impact on the strength?
Yeah, these islands are pretty small, so it would depend on the exact track. If it went right over one of the islands, there maybe could be some disruption, but it just depends on exactly where the center goes and sort of how the eye wall and the eye interact with what islands there might be. It's usually bigger islands that tend to have a more of an impact. Islands the size of, say, Puerto Rico or Jamaica or Hispaniola, which we all know is historically been very detrimental to storms as it's moved across. These smaller islands tend to have less of an impact, and the topography there is not really, really high either. But we'll see how it goes in the next 24 hours.
Big vacation week. I've already had people asking me, should I cancel my vacation to Jamaica? So what are you telling folks who maybe aren't directly impacted here in the US, but have travel plans outside of the US?
Yeah, you just want to keep monitoring the forecast. We could see impacts in Jamaica as early as late Tuesday, early Wednesday. Certainly, there is the risk of tropical storm and hurricane conditions there. And then farther downstream, places like the Cayman Islands, the Yucatan Peninsula, Belize, Mexico, even northern portions of Central America, southern portions of Hispaniola, Cuba. There's a lot of land areas in play that could see impacts from Beryl as we go through the week, especially as you move in from the central into the northwestern Caribbean. So just keep checking on the forecast and understand what the risk is before you make any decisions.
And I know that you guys always say it's important to have flexibility when it comes to 4 or 5 days out. Can folks
Yeah.
on the East Coast at this point, though, relax and say, I don't have to worry about Beryl?
On the U.S. East Coast, yeah, I don't think there's any risk of Beryl, but we certainly there could be impacts in the Gulf of Mexico. Beyond Friday into next weekend, we could see Beryl move back into the Gulf. Whether it continues more on a westward track and moves more into mainland Mexico, or tries to make a more northward turn, potentially threatening places like Texas, it's just too early to tell. But keep checking in on the forecast throughout the week. This is for folks in the Gulf of Mexico. We have the luxury of time with the storm. It's already existing. We can watch the forecast evolve, see how that risk changes and that threat evolves over the next several days. But I mean, it's a great reminder, like I said earlier, to someone, if a Category 4 hurricane in June isn't motivation enough for you to make sure you have your hurricane plan in place for the rest of this season, then I don't know what will motivate you. But this is a very serious situation and a great reminder to everybody in the U.S. and elsewhere in hurricane-prone areas in the Atlantic that we have to be ready.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a couple of other things brewing out there right now, too, with likelihood climbing that we could be looking at some other name systems coming up.
Yeah, we're watching two areas. We have one area, an area of low pressure in the southern Gulf of Mexico, not too far from where Alberto formed, a week or so ago, that could become a short-lived depression or tropical storm, going to primarily be a rainfall impacts for portions of Mexico. Perhaps more concerning is an area out in the far eastern tropical Atlantic that may take a path somewhat similar to what Beryl has. And we have a high chance of formation for that coming along and could impact the Lesser Antilles as soon as, say, Wednesday of this upcoming week. So, and some of the same areas that may be affected by Beryl could be affected by another system, which is not great, because you have areas that might be very vulnerable in the aftermath of such a significant impact from Beryl, that not going to take a major hurricane or a hurricane at all to bring significant impacts in the aftermath of a significant hurricane strike from Beryl in some of those regions. So that's something we're very concerned about, and we'll watch as we go through the week.
Folks can get information directly from the Hurricane Center, right? That's the best place to get the information. And now you're putting out Spanish advisories and Spanish discussions too, right?
Yeah, if you go to hurricanes.gov, you'll find all of our advisory products, text, graphics. And we do have AI translated Spanish language products. They've been working really well. They show up almost within a minute of the transmission of the English language products. They're automatically translated. So things like the public advisory, the key messages that really get to the hazards, the cyclone discussion, tropical cyclone updates, the outlook, all of that is available in Spanish in both the Atlantic and the Eastern Pacific basins. And, just a reminder too, to folks in the U.S., go to weather.gov, find your local National Weather Service office, and people in the Caribbean, other countries, make sure you're in touch with your local meteorological service, your local government officials as we deal with Beryl and whatever else the season brings for us.
Keep those emergency alerts on your phone too.
Exactly.
Always
Yeah. Have
important.
multiple ways to get information 24 hours a day. It's really important.